just take a moment and think about the word anger and think about when you're angry. What happens to you physically? And how do you express your anger? Today, I want to tackle that. I want to be able to say, how do we handle this heavy emotion? And so I'm so excited today to have Julie Christianson. And we're going to tackle that very question for you. And one of the things that I really want to share today about Julie is I met her, maybe aging us, so I'm really sorry, decades ago. And I was writing for the St. Catharines Standard, and they had Niagara Voices. And I remember meeting her, and I remember reading her articles. And I was fascinated how this was an emotion that she was going to tackle because decades ago, anger was so suppressed. We were not allowed to talk about it, similar to grief. Welcome to Grief Uprooted, a podcast dedicated to sharing your grief stories. Together, we embark on the mystery of one's grief journey as they learn to live, heal, and be courageous in a world rooted in trauma. Join myself, Christine, in an open discussion to help you uproot the grief in all our lives. I am an award-winning author, professional speaker, and humanitarian in the field of grief and trauma. I want you to be part of the discussion. So today I'm really excited and completely honored to have you here. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure. Yeah, when I think about it, it's like, oh my gosh, Niagara Voices, we're going back. Like, can I say the actual amount of years? Because we're like pushing 25 years,
Yes,
right?
we are.
24 years or 25 years
Yeah.
ago was when we moved here, and I was privileged to have the opportunity to write a series of articles for Niagara Voices. And yes, at the banquet that they had at the end of the season or whatever that was, that we all got together, and yeah, and we've been connected ever since. It's been a cool association.
It has been. And I thought what I found so interesting about your writing was that you were tackling something nobody was talking about. And I was doing the same
Hmm.
and completely different in a sense, but then almost the same and kind of interact with each other. So I guess one of the biggest questions I've always had is why anger? Like, why did you pick this topic?
Because I suppose I am, if you look at my personality style, I'm ENFJ sorry, INFJ, introvert, not extrovert. The INFJ personality style is called the advocate. And one of the things about the advocate is that they are the fierce defender of the underdog, and that is always who I've been. And when I grew up in a household where anger was part of the everyday experience,
Hmm.
and I didn't like it then.
Yeah.
But as I was developing, through my teenage years, and I was experiencing intense anger, I didn't know what to do with it except for to do what I had always seen. But
Mm,
what I found was that whenever I behaved that way, it felt so disingenuous, and I felt horrible about myself. And so then I went on this journey to figure out how can I do this? How can I express myself? How can I be assertive? How can I get my problems solved? How can I get my needs met without doing what I've always seen?
mm.
And honestly, when I went to school, I did my undergraduate in psychology, and I didn't learn much. I didn't learn much about anger
Yeah.
when I was in school. It wasn't until I was in the field working as a mental health worker that, the problems sort of manifested themselves, and I went on this journey to find some answers, and then it just became my passion, and it has been ever since.
That's why you're so amazing at what you do. That's
Thank
the
you.
bottom line. Because I think we go to school to educate ourselves about processes um and then we have all this knowledge, but then when you get out there to work those front lines, you're like, what about this? What about that? And then you start to see these gaps. And you're right. Like I don't know how many times I've worked with psychologists or I'm out running a camp and they go, they never taught us about grief and emotions. I know they are now a little bit more, and that's coming into play because we're around pushing it. But it wasn't back then. So when we think about anger, I kind of want to ask, the biggest question because it always comes up in society. We kind of suppress it. And so one of my biggest questions is the difference between gender. And now I hesitate to say that because there's a lot of people that don't identify with either gender, or we can switch genders. So is does that stand anymore? Like it's always been that men are more angry? Um,
No.
but I don't really see that. So I'm very confused by this because
Yeah. The reality is when you look at it statistically, there
okay.
is no real difference
Oh,
between the experience of anger for men or for women.
okay.
Women get angry, men get angry. We all experience this emotion. The difference is in how we express it. And
Mm,
the difference is not as glaring as one might think. I remember back in the late 90s, there was this article that came out that said that when men are feeling angry, they act out, right? They engage in some sort of physical aggressive activity, and that's normalized and that's fine.
mm.
But women tend and befriend. I'll never forget that statement, tending and befriending. So what we do is we get together with our girls and we sob and we cry and we drink wine and we commiserate. That's actually not true. It's not true. The reality is that women's expression of anger
Mhm.
when they are similar to men are just not accepted.
Mm.
That's the difference,
Oh, that's
right?
it.
When a man says, "You need to get this done, you need to get it done right now," everyone sees that as an expression of his authority. When a woman does it, she's the B word. She
Mm.
doesn't have any self-control. She's too emotional, right? So we really do express our anger very similarly. It's just that one way is normalized for
Mm-hmm.
men or people who identify as men, and for women and those who identify as women, it's still considered unacceptable. And so our only option then is to tend and befriend because any other ways that we might express anger are considered socially taboo.
Oh, that's so fascinating. My other company, when my brother had died, my father took his life insurance and started up a truck business. So I purchased that business, that corporation, and it's mainly men. And well, my whole staff except my secretary. And being part of the boys club for 20 years, because we're part of a larger uh, conglomerate and we go to all these things, I was the only woman that went in the beginning 20 years ago. And that's what it felt like. If I was upset about something, well, there's that woman just, bitching. And where when I would often say, and I hate to say that I'm saying this, but I know a lot of you may relate to this. I say to my son, I need you to go in there and speak. And he'll look at me and go, what are you talking about? Because he's of that younger generation. And I'm like, they will hear you. They don't hear me.
Yeah.
And so that is so, just hearing that makes so much sense because of the plain fact, especially as a redhead with curly hair, everyone thinks I have this super bad temper. And they're always talking about it. And I think, well, I don't feel any different than the men. It's just if I was to lose it, I'm the Tasmanian devil.
Yes.
Whereas if
Yeah.
a man, that's so interesting, so interesting. So is that brought on and literally by society, I would assume. Has that changed at all over the generations? Have we gotten better with this?
No, sadly,
There's the answer, people,
sadly,
right there.
no. No, I don't think we have. I mean, one of the things that I teach in my anger solutions program is these myths that we have about anger. And one of those myths is that women and children should not express anger, that anger is the purview of men. And people are like, oh, but surely, it's 2025. I'm like, yeah, it's 2025.
Mm,
and look at the premier of Alberta right now,
hmm.
who is doing what she thinks is best for her province, right? Like, I'm not talking about the politics, I'm talking about the relationship. And
Yeah.
just look at how she's being vilified in the news
Yes.
because she dares to go to the United States and sit down and have meetings with people to
Yeah.
see if they can sort something about the tariffs. But Doug Ford did the same thing.
Hmm.
And everyone went, "Oh, what a good, strong leader he is." You
Yeah.
know? So that it's still there. Like she's saying, "I will do what I have to do to defend my province." That's exactly what Doug Ford said. Everyone praised him for it, and everyone's vilifying her for it.
Yeah. And it's
Same language, same tone,
mhm,
same firmness, but she's a woman, so it's not acceptable. It's fascinating and disappointing at the same time.
yeah, so true. So when we come to grief, I know myself working with teenagers with anger. I remember September 11th, terrorist attacks eating down and United Nations Friendship Ambassadors and the Lions International got together and they ran grief camps. And I had a teen boy camp. Lucky me. And I was like, oh boy. And in the end, loved these children. But I was trying to find constructive ways because it felt like everybody was scared of my group. And they were like, they're so big and and they're expressive. And so, we did the basketball, we did I put them on stage and gave them outlets. But when it comes to grief and anger, anger seems to be like, it's like shock and then pissed off right away. And so sometimes I think those two just kind of blend right in. And why do we feel this anger? Like, I guess for grief, sometimes I think we're mad because we're losing something we want.
Yes.
But how would you explain anger and grief?
Yeah. So if you think about the four reasons why people would experience anger at all, number one is that someone has broken a rule.
Oh,
The second is that a boundary has been violated. The
mm,
third is that your needs or expectations are not being met. And I want you to remember that one because that one's important. Your needs are not being met.
uh,
And fourth, your goal attainment is interfered with or thwarted. So if your goal was to live with this person until you both turned 100
yeah,
and they die at 50,
not fair.
not fair. So there's anger there. If what you need is you need this person in your life because they're the single person that you love and trust and depend on, and now they're gone,
Not fair.
right? So if you think about it in that context, if the rule was you're going to take good care of yourself and so you don't get sick,
Hmm.
and then the person neglects themselves and they get sick and they pass away, it's done, right? Or even think about it in terms of the loss of things. We grieve the loss of our experience. We grieve the loss of our jobs. If our expectation was that if I work hard
Hmm.
and I do a good job, I'll be valued in this workplace, and then you get right-sized and you lose your job.
Yeah.
Now your expectations are not met and your goal attainment is interfered with, right? Because your goal was to do a good job and stay there, and
Hmm.
then it wasn't recognized. What if your need is to be recognized, to be accepted, to be treated with respect, and those needs aren't met? You see what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
like, if we look at it through that lens, when we lose someone we love or we lose a relationship, whether that's a working relationship, our relationship with money, our relationship with a partner, whatever it is, when we start to grieve that, of course, anger will be an essential component of that.
Oh, wow. Can you explain those four again?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
number one, rule is broken.
Okay.
Number two, boundary is violated.
Mm,
Number three, need or expectation is not met. And
mm.
number four, your goals are interfered with.
All those things make me very mad.
Sure, of course they do.
I don't like any of those. And I'm
Yeah,
the most impatient person. And like, especially if it's interfering in my goal. Like I
yeah,
have a plan and I want to go this way, and somebody is standing there telling me I can't. That just,
right. Get off my road.
yeah, get off my road, get out. I'm
Yeah,
doing it. And it just makes me want to do it more.
yes,
So when we talk about that, when I'm gonna jump ahead because the political state of our world right now is pissing everybody off. Mind my language, please. But I don't know a better word for this because when you state those four, all of them are being interfered with
Yes,
right now. All of
absolutely.
them.
Absolutely.
And I have to say, I'm getting angry now. I'm not an angry person, but like boundaries totally violated.
Yes.
My ability to run my two corporations totally violated.
Yeah.
Wanting to reach my goals,
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
So it's and what I pictured gonna be like what I my needs are and everything are totally being violated.
Yes. Yeah.
And the people who are there doesn't really matter to me. What matters is what's happening in our world. And I can see this anger coming out.
Yeah.
And you can read it on social media. You can see all the different perspectives of it all. Um, when does anger, because I believe like you touch on the grief of so many things. I think so many times we think about grief, we just think about death. I think we are all grieving right now because we had a relationship with other countries that was
Yes.
beautiful,
Yeah.
that we worked together and we always felt safe. I'm giving myself goosebumps because we're not safe anymore.
Right.
We're scared.
Yes.
And now we're sitting here and I'm wondering, when does anger become okay to express? Like we're mad. And I see it in both countries all over the world. People are starting to act out. Is it when does it become positive?
So anger is always okay to express. I
Oh.
want to lead with that. There is nothing wrong with expressing anger. What tends to be problematic is the way in which we express anger,
Mhm.
right? So like when you're happy, no one is gatekeeping that. No one is telling you, listen, you're just too excited. You know, you just won $15 million, but tone it down a little bit. Like nobody's telling you that, right?
Yeah.
But when someone threatens our sovereignty, and threatens our boundaries and threatens our economic stability and threatens our safety,
Hmm.
sure, we might get a little, chuffed about that. Like we might be a little bit mad about it. I've got an Elbows Up Canada t-shirt. I'll be wearing it a lot in the days to come,
Yeah.
right? Like, of course you're going to feel some kind of way about it, but how do we express that?
Yeah.
And I think, we could protest, but the thing about protesting is it only works if the people that you're protesting to are reasonable enough to listen.
Mm.
That's not the issue in this case, right? We're dealing with an unreasonable person and an unreasonable administration. So the only way then that we can express ourselves, I think, is what Canada is doing and doing well is and I don't want to make this political because I'm not about the politics, I'm about the relationship, but this is a relationship problem, what's happening between Canada and our neighbor to the south. So, yes, we can hold our line. We can say, this is our boundary and you will not come any further, right? The same thing we do in personal relationships.
Mhm.
When you are grieving, let me circle back around to that. When you're grieving a loss and someone says, I can't believe you're still crying over that. Like, why can't you move on? Excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's my boundary. This is my grief experience.
Hmm.
And you may not grieve in the same way, and that's okay for you, but you will also respect the
Hmm.
way that I am working through my grief, right? Like you don't get to tell me whether my grief is appropriate or not, right? Like that's my experience. And so we can set boundaries and we can say, this is how we feel. And you don't get to tell us to feel differently. You don't get to tell us to roll over and show you our belly and let you just walk in and change the boundary lines and do what you want with our country. No, 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 we're not going to do that.
Hmm.
So being firm, being assertive, being setting up, if we have to set up barriers in the way of taking American products off the shelves and those sorts of things, I think that's appropriate. Scratching the paint on Teslas, burning up, Tesla uh, charging stations and vandalizing dealerships, I don't think that it's not a long-term productive. It feels satisfying in the moment.
Yeah.
Kind of like when someone insults you and you slap them in the face. It feels good for a second,
Yeah.
but now you've just committed assault. So
Right.
problems. So it's the same kind of thing. Like, setting a Tesla on fire might feel incredibly gratifying.
Hmm.
However, you've just broken the law and there are consequences for that, right? You've just violated someone else's rules and boundaries. So now you may have to deal with the consequences of that. So I think if we're very mindful and intentional about how we express ourselves
Hmm.
and we do it collectively as a nation, I think that gives us our best shot. But it's also, what's happening on the macro scale also happens on the micro scale
Hmm.
when we feel that we're misunderstood.
Yeah.
We feel as though people are not empathizing with our grief. We have expectations that people will be more sympathetic and they're not. All those sorts of things. We might get angry and we might start to act out because we don't know any other way to make people understand
Yeah.
what we're going through.
That
Uh,
makes so much sense. And
but I think we need to be mindful that people don't have to understand what we're going through because we're going through it anyway,
yeah,
whether they understand or not.
yeah.
It's our experience, not theirs. So we have to engage in the self-care and not necessarily rely on other people to step in and do the heavy lifting for us.
I love how you took our political situation and then pulled it back to grief because it's a great example of us. Like I feel like that person who's scratching Tesla, lighting it on fire, they've suppressed this grief. And the grief is, or in the anger, I mean, is so suppressed that even when I read something like that, I'm like, haha, right? I know
Yes,
majority of
you
you
got a
are
little bit
like,
of
yeah,
satisfaction.
let's
Don't
just
gloat.
all say it, right? I know who's listening. You are going, yeah. And and then all of a sudden you're like, what has the world come to? So that individual who takes that step, I feel like has suppressed this grief or anger and just
Yeah.
pushed it down and went, okay. And then something snaps and you say, I'm just going to do it. Right. And that just, it causes it, the fire just keeps rolling. Right.
Yes.
And even with grief, when it happens and you're told to hold your anger, like don't lose it, don't. So many times working primarily with men, I end up with these people who have bottled, and it's not okay to show my grief. And working with younger people, I'm like, this is okay to show anger.
Yes.
We just have to find a way that works for you. And sometimes just expressing you're angry. Sometimes, and I think that that's what's happened. You feel like we haven't, that older generation, our generation, hasn't been taught how to express anger. And then it just kind of peters forward. And whatever your parents do, then you're going to do. And now we're in a world where this is not okay. So it's kind of like I wish in school systems we would educate you on this because your parents at home are from the older generation. They're yelling. This is how they did it, right? And now we're saying, here, we're going to put you to school every day. If we could just regulate emotions and say, these are things that you feel. My biggest beef, and I know everybody out there knows that, we teach our children how to make love and make life, but we don't teach our children what happens when that life dies. And I feel like this is part of it. Do you think
Yeah.
if we got to our kids and this would definitely help with mental health?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a huge advocate of that, and I've got an entire chapter in my book, The Rise of Rage,
Hmm.
dedicated just to that issue. I lay out the entire thing, how I would do it if I had the ability to go in and change school policy. I would have it so that in the formative years, junior kindergarten, senior kindergarten, grade one, grade two, we would be teaching our children how to self-regulate and teaching them how to build pro-social life skills. And then when they get to grade 6 and 7, where bullying really peaks
Yeah.
and kids are at their meanest, we
Hmm.
would make sure that they are engaging in pro-social activities throughout that entire school year. I would also make counseling mandatory
Hmm.
for every student before they finish high school.
Yeah.
So because, ACEs by definition, adverse childhood experiences happen before the age of 18.
Hmm.
So we have exposure to violence, domestic violence, traumatic experiences, sexual molestation, sexual assault. We have all these things happen between junior kindergarten and high school, and then they graduate and we send them off to college and expect them to be successful. And that's why the freshman 15 and the dropout rate in the first year of college and university is so high
Yeah.
because kids can't cope with the weight of the mental health issues that they've carried through from their ACEs. So why wouldn't we, the same way that in Ontario, we encourage students to get 40 hours of volunteer time, why can't we encourage students to get 40 hours of therapy?
Yeah. And call it
Make
self-care.
it part of the curriculum.
Yeah. And I think that it falls under that self-care component
Yes.
because you've learned how to react to your anger through those years. So if somebody has violated your body, instead of reacting like, I can express this anger, you bottle it. You go, I don't want to tell anyone. I don't want anyone to know. I did something wrong.
Yeah.
And you carry that anger. So then in your adult life, when something hits you, oh, that's how I deal with anger. We just bottle it.
And what people don't understand is that when you repress that emotion, that anger or that fear or that grief, it's energy.
Yeah.
And that energy, if it doesn't have an outlet, it's going to start doing stuff in your body,
Yeah.
right? You understand this as someone who studies Reiki, like that energy has to go somewhere. So it's going to find the weakest point
Yeah.
in your body and it's going to attack it there.
Yeah.
We interrupt this podcast for a dirty moment.
Gee, it's all you.
Okay, so my trigger moment is it's when I see someone who reminds me of my best friend who passed away. And when I'm reminded of him, I do have a little bit of anger because he he watched his own father die of lung cancer and didn't make the changes to his health that might have prevented what happened to him. And it just makes me so mad. It's like, why can't you still be here? And again, I reframe it in the sense that he may not be here. And even just the other day, I was working on some things for my business, and I was like, ah, I know what Tom would tell me, and what he would tell me is pull up your big girl panties and figure this out. And so then it just becomes a moment of like humor instead of me staying in that anger because I can hear his voice in my head and that lets me know that he's always with me. And I can rely on his advice because it's embedded in there. So I don't have to call him. I don't have to say, like, where are you? What are you doing? Why can't you help me with this? Because he's already in here. And if I just tap into that, then I can access that connection with him. And so it's hard, right? It's still sad. But again, I can reframe the problem instead of feeling like the problem can never be solved.
Okay, I love that whole first part of this where we talked about things, and I really appreciate you talking about things that majority of people don't want to talk about. And one of the things you had mentioned is I'm not a political person. And I just want to bring to everyone's attention that I'm not either. Most probably you as the listener are not. We have bigger things, like you're tuning into Grief Uprooted because somebody in your life died or you're experiencing grief. But this is what it's brought us to. It's taken our attention. We're all super hyper focused on that. And it monopolizes your life. And one of the other things we talked about was how we suppress grief and then eventually that energy comes through our body. I kind of feel like, do you think that when it's suppressed, it also explodes? Like we see these riots, we see all this stuff happening. And I think an individual who suppresses anger through that grieving process, eventually it explodes. And
Yeah, if we hold it in for too long, it's going to find its way out,
Mhm.
right? And for people who tend to be more emotionally expressive, that's going to come out in either verbal aggression, loads of emotional dysregulation, or even verbal abuse or physical aggression and physical abuse. For people who internalize,
Mhm.
it's still going to show up, but it's going to show up in a major illness. It's going to show up in a mental breakdown, right? It's going to show up in that individual who's been holding all that energy and never finds an outlet for it. It's going to turn itself inward and harm the person. Whereas people who tend to externalize will end up harming someone or damaging something.
Mm, that's exactly it. Now, the other question is everyone says this phrase that anger is a secondary emotion.
No,
I have no idea, so I'm asking. Um, because a lot of times with grief, I will say to people, you're grieving because you loved something. So when I think about anger, is that true? It's a secondary emotion? Like, why am I angry?
it's really not. Let me just say this. I ascribe to basic emotions theory in psychology, which says that anger is a basic emotion. It's something that is built into the DNA of every human being. It begins to demonstrate itself or to manifest itself usually within the first year.
Hmm.
If you think about, when you had your babies, you could tell when your baby was angry by the way they cried. You
Mm,
could tell the hungry cry. You could tell the tired cry. You could tell the uncomfortable cry. That was the only way they knew how to communicate. But when they were upset,
mhm.
when they were like mad, this diaper has been on me for 3 hours and it's wet and I need it off. Like you could tell,
Yeah.
right? So, but by the time they get to be about 12 months old, you can see they're trying to do things. They're maybe learning how to walk or they're trying to put blocks together and pull them apart. And when they're not able to do it because
Mm,
they don't have the manual dexterity, you'll see the frustration come out. They'll start to cry. They might throw something across the room. If an older child takes a toy away
oh,
that
yeah.
they're trying to play with, they'll start crying. That's the first evidence of anger and frustration that you see in children. And to say that anger is below the surface,
Hmm.
sorry, let me rephrase that. To say that anger is what you see
Hmm.
and the real emotion is under the surface, I think that is um it minimizes the importance and the value of anger in our lives.
Mm.
When you think of the anger iceberg, for example, I talk about this in my book, where, the traditionalists would say anger is what you see and fear or grief or something else is under the
Yeah.
surface.
Yeah. That's
What
it.
you're telling me is that anger is behavior. So
Ah.
what I'm seeing is somebody is acting out,
Hmm.
but there's an emotion that's informing that, when in fact, what you're seeing is behavior and anger is informing that behavior. Right?
Yeah.
So anger is a primary emotion. And yes, sometimes we use anger as a way to mask what we're truly feeling, but that doesn't make the anger secondary,
Ah. I
right?
think that's the one that most people like when someone's screaming or yelling at you and you can't figure out why. Uh,
Mhm.
I guess, what do you do in that situation? Like if you're in a relationship and someone starts screaming at you and you're trying to talk yourself through it, and that person's at that heightened moment of anger, do you just stop and let them do what they're doing? And then, like, would you even walk away and then maybe return to this? What do you do?
It depends on the person, right? You know them best. So like if someone is really wilding out and you're like, I'm just going to let you go. It
Mhm.
actually, in a lot of cases, it makes sense to just let them go until they're finished because no matter what you say, they won't be able to hear you. They're so escalated, they're so outside their window of tolerance that they won't be able to process what you're saying. So it's best to just let them release. Remember, anger is energy.
Yeah,
So allow them to release that energy. Once they've released the energy, then they will naturally start to come back down to their baseline. And at that point, then you can have a conversation. And if you remember that anger shows up because we have a problem that needs solving,
yeah,
and it's one of four things, right? Broken rule, violated boundary, thwarted goal, or unmet need or expectation. What's going on with you right now? What
yeah,
do you need?
yeah,
Right? And if we can just stay there, then it's like, okay, let's identify the problem. You're angry because you have a problem. Let's focus on solving the problem. Because if I try to focus you on fixing your feelings,
mm,
I might be successful, but only for a moment, because guess what? Once the feeling is fixed, the problem is still there.
yeah. That makes
So
so
we
much
have
sense.
to focus on let's solve the problem that made you angry in the first place, and your anger will take care of itself.
And in grief, what happens is that anger's there and you really can't solve the problem. So you end up blowing, and then what happens is the journey begins. You start walking down that path going, okay, the anger's not going to do me any good. Um, it makes me feel better to scream and yell and get it out. But it's not going to change the situation. My loved one's not coming back.
Exactly. I think what we could do though, because we can't solve the problem of that person is gone, but
Mhm.
what we can do is reframe the problem,
How do I do
right?
it?
So it's like, I'll just, I guess I'll use personal experience. When my mom passed away in '07,
Mhm.
um, I, one of the first things I said to myself and my family was, this is what she wanted.
Mm.
And that helped. It didn't make me feel any better, but it helped me to reframe it
Yeah.
because I understood that she had been sick for years and she had this messaging on repeat that literally drove me crazy while she was alive. It's like, when I die, don't be sad. I'm going to be with Jesus. And she would have this whole thing. And I'm
Yeah.
like, could you stop? Just
Yeah.
please
Yeah.
stop. Like, I know one day you're going to pass away. It's going to be sad. We'll cry, but yes, we'll wear bold colors to your funeral. Yes, we'll celebrate. Okay, now stop talking about it. But when she did pass away, her voice was in my head saying, don't be sad. You
Yeah.
know, I'm going to be with Jesus. It's not a problem. I'm fine.
Yeah.
And so even though I was devastated, I kept saying like she wanted nothing more
Yeah.
than to leave this life to go to that life, right? And that's what she believed in. And as far as I know, if there is an afterlife, she's very happy in it.
Hmm.
So the other piece of it for me was, I guess, reconciling the fact that while she's physically gone,
Hmm.
I still have her spirit with me, right? Like I still have the memory of her. I
Yeah.
have a picture of her on the bulletin board in my office, and every once in a while I look over and I'll be like, Mommy, I hope you're proud,
Yeah.
like I hope you're
Exactly.
good, because I can hear you in my head saying, Why are you doing that? And like all of those things. So she's still with me. I
Yeah.
still have all the funny stories, I still have all the great memories. So reframing it that, yes, there are times when I pick up the phone and I just want to call her
Yeah.
and I can't. So in that moment, I'm very sad.
Hmm.
But she's always around, she's always around. She's in my face. She's in my siblings' faces. She's in her books. Like, I can pick up a book and I can hear her voice as I'm reading her words. So
Yeah.
I don't have to be angry
Hmm.
and I don't have to live in sadness. But one of the other things that I often tell my clients, I'm working with a lot of clients who are in grief right now, and one of the things that I say to them is, listen, when you suppress the sadness when it comes up, it lingers.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
lean into it. When I'm having a moment where I'm feeling very sad, sometimes I'll read my mom's letters and then I'm a wreck. Um, but it's like I just lean into the sadness. I
Yeah.
embrace the sadness. I cry if I need to.
Hmm.
I wear flannel and I curl up in my favorite chair and I put my weighted blanket on and I do all the things, right? Like I do the
Yeah.
self-care, but I allow the sadness to be sadness.
Yeah.
Then it rolls out like weather,
Yeah.
right? Like we have a couple of cloudy days with rain and it's windy and it's cold and it's miserable, and then the sun comes out. And
Yeah.
it's very much that way with grief. Like it comes in waves and then it rolls out in waves.
Yeah.
And if you just allow it to be what it is, what you're doing then is you're honoring the love and the relationship that you had with that person.
That's so
When
true.
you suppress it,
Yeah. It
it hurts more and it hurts for longer.
and it's toxic to your body.
Yes.
Um, as I mentioned, I'm going away to do my Reiki masters. When I did the first two levels, all I did was cry. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me the whole time. I kept going, why am I crying profusely for 3 days straight? And I felt very, very um, vulnerable. And I'm excited to go back because I feel a lot stronger. And it wasn't really sadness I felt. I was angry at the world my career has been 25 years of in this world where I worked in world tragedies. What happened environmentally, through war, through attacks, through like it was all sorts of stuff. And I thought, wow, like this is the place I live. And then I realized I was going through all these different emotions and releasing all of this. And I find in grief when we can just acknowledge it and go, I'm angry. And sometimes, the difference between I remember somebody coming up once and saying, I understand how you feel. I'm getting a divorce. And I went, my brother's dead. What am I going to do? 1-800 heaven? Go find your husband. And I was so mad at that. And I actually had um, a lady on, Miss Hanson. Oh, I loved her on Grief Uprooted. And she just said it. She started out cards, sympathy cards. And she goes, I just wanted to throat punch that person. That's why I started a sympathy card company. And then I just thought, throat punch. I haven't heard that in years. But I thought, this is her anger towards, and so in grief and with anger, where does judgment fall when we're watching someone flip out or somebody comes up and says, I can feel your anger, this happened to me? Is it similar to grief? You don't compare your angers.
Yeah, well, they say comparison is the grief of joy, is the thief of joy.
Oh, this is true.
Comparison is the thief of joy. That's the phrase. So we really shouldn't, but it is human nature to do it because we want to relate to each other,
Oh, that's true.
right? That comparison is actually an attempt at saying, I connect with your story,
Mm,
right? I feel what you're feeling. We do it very clumsily.
yeah.
It's like, oh, my pet parakeet died, and I understand. It's like,
Yeah. No, you don't.
okay, I understand. Like you may have had a very close relationship to your pet, but for me, it doesn't feel like it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that all human beings could learn to do much better is to be honest about what they're truly feeling.
Mm,
And when we feel misunderstood, to be able to communicate that in a way that's compassionate and empathetic.
yeah.
Right? So like if I'm grieving the loss of a job, like many people in the United States right now, just woke up one morning and they were just told don't bother coming to work, and if you do, there's going to be consequences, blah blah blah. Like it's devastating,
Yeah.
for the people who work in US aid,
Hmm.
and they've dedicated their lives
Yeah.
to helping others, to be told that they're no longer relevant, they're no longer valuable, their
Mm,
work doesn't matter. That's hard.
yeah.
Now, if I come up to you and say, I lost a favorite pair of shoes one time,
Yeah.
I know how you feel. That just doesn't
It doesn't work.
make any sense.
Yeah.
But why can't we just say, this must be horrible for you?
Yeah.
Why do we have to make it about us?
Because
You
we
know,
don't want to deal with their emotions.
but why not? Why
It's so
not? We don't
hard.
have to.
That's
And
what
this is the
people
thing,
say.
like you
That.
don't have to deal with someone else's emotions. You just have to acknowledge it and validate it. That's all.
Yeah.
So to say, this is horrible. I'm so sad for you. I wish that things were different for you. How can I support you? Why can't we just do that?
Yeah.
You
And I
know?
think I love what you're talking about because it's relationships.
Yes.
I had a
Yeah.
relationship to this job. And even though it's just a job, it's a living thing.
Yes.
There were people I saw there. This was what I did every day. And that's with grief when people come into me and say, I don't understand why my dog dying feels so much horrible than my grandmother dying. Well, you had a relationship with the dog. The dog was there every day, every moment.
Yeah.
So it's the same as a job, right? It's there
Right.
every day. It's that relationship
Yes.
is
And one of the things that I teach in my work is that every problem is at its heart a relationship problem.
mm,
And so if you're looking at, oh, I'm hurt so bad over this thing here that happened, look at it through the lens of relationship. What was your relationship to that thing, to that person, to that job, to that role?
so good.
And then you'll understand why it hurts so much,
Yeah.
because this relationship is fractured, it's broken, it's ended. The person I loved has passed away. The thing that I valued
Mhm.
has been destroyed, whatever it is, then it's like, okay, so I can either solve this problem or I can reframe this problem. It's one of the two.
Nice. So if do you have any tips or I guess ways that somebody, if we're in that moment and we're going to start to rise, um, how do you bring yourself down? Like what's the best way to express your anger?
Yeah, so honestly, the best way to express your anger is assertively. I'll start there. But sometimes it's hard to be assertive when you're outside of your window of tolerance. So the most important thing is to bring yourself back into a space where you're able to think clearly and make good decisions. And so I'll do this as quickly as I can. What we want to do is we want to shut off that area in our brain, the amygdala that's responsible for intense emotions, motivation, instinct, survival.
Hmm.
It likes to run the show when we're feeling intense emotions. And what happens is that our frontal lobes tend to shut down a little bit. And our temporal lobes, which is why people won't hear
Hmm.
when you're really angry and they can't reason with you when they're really angry.
Hmm.
So what we want to do is to make sure that we don't get into that highly escalated place is we want to do some deep breathing so that we push oxygen back into our frontal lobes to bring them back online.
Mm.
And then while we're taking those deep breaths, excuse me, we want to ask some careful questions. What's going on right now? What does it mean to me? How
Mm.
do I feel about it? What would I like to see happen? What is my desired outcome? And this is a really important question because your outcome determines what you will do next,
Mm.
right? And so if your desired outcome is, I want this feeling to go away, so I'm going to do the quickest, fastest thing, you're probably going to get yourself arrested for burning down a Tesla dealership. Okay.
Yep.
But if you think it through and you say, my desired outcome is for me to feel at peace. My desired outcome is for me to remain Canadian. My desired outcome is for Canada to remain a sovereign nation, right? My desired outcome is to be able to think about the person I loved and lost without having this feeling like a dagger is going through my heart.
Hmm.
That's what I want. Then what can I do to get that outcome? And then you run down every single possibility and you ask the question, what's the best thing that can happen if I do that thing? What's the worst thing that can happen if I do that thing? And
Hmm.
then you choose the course of action that will get you to your desired long-term outcome with the least amount of negative consequences.
I like
And when you train your brain to process every problem that way, your relationships get easier to navigate,
mm.
right? And your problems become easier to solve because you're not just thinking about what do I want right now. You're not thinking about the quick fix. You're thinking about 5 years from now, how do I want to feel about what happened today?
Yeah.
What can I do to get me closer to that feeling instead of feeling guilty or feeling inadequate or feeling incompetent or feeling useless? Like, I want to feel like I can move on, not past this person, but with this person, with their memory
Hmm.
and with the joy and all the love that I had for that person. I want to move on with those things intact, but I don't really know how to navigate that. But if I have that as my desired destination, I'm going to choose a little bit more carefully
Where you
what I'm going to do and how I'm going to interact with other people on that journey.
Oh, that's so good. Because, and I feel like you just put the puzzle together for me because in grief, the prefrontal cortex goes.
Yes.
So, you can be talking to people and it's like they hear Charlie Brown. They're like, wah, wah, wah,
Wah,
wah.
wah, wah, wah,
And
wah.
I work with organizations and go, your staff is not going to hear you. Like they're all trauma workers. Their prefrontal cortex is done. And
Yeah.
how do we bring them back? And then when you talk about the amygdala and in the back of the brain, I think, oh, there's the puzzle piece,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So reasoning is all gone. Like people just can't think clear. I love all of this that you've shared. So what if I want this book? What if my listeners want to get a copy? Where do we go?
Okay. So I know that you have listeners all over. This is what the book looks like. It's called The Rise of Rage.
Hmm.
It is available wherever books are sold. So if you're a Chapters Indigo person, if you're Barnes and Noble, if you are Amazon, or you love independent bookstores, you will find it everywhere. It's available in hardback, in audiobook, audio CD, and Kindle. So yeah, you can find it anywhere. If you want to really dig in,
Hmm.
there is a workbook available as well. So reach out to me and I can connect you with the workbook. Um, and for any other information about this or any of our other books, they can go to our website, leverageu.ca.
Oh, that's so great. And also, it'll be on robertspress.ca or robertspress.com now. So if anybody's looking for it, they can reach out that way. Thank you so much. I've learned so much about anger in just this little segment. So to everybody out there, if you want to reach out to Julie, don't hesitate it. Visit her website. You can also access her books and her through us if you want to send us a comment or you want to send an email or visit robertspress.com and reach out. Tell us what you think. What do you think about all this anger talk and all this political talk? Where do you sit and how are you handling your anger? Love hearing your comments, love hearing your stories. And always remember, it is only together that we grieve, and it's only together that we heal. Take care, everybody. Grief Uprooted professional grief and empowerment coaching are not to be used as a substitute for professional advice by legal, medical, financial, business, spiritual, or other qualified professionals. All our products and services are designed for grief empowerment through learning and sharing of one's lived experiences.